So why have we changed some of the interfaces in Azure Verified Modules? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Hi, today we're going to be doing a little update on some of the interface changes that we've been making in Azure Verified Modules. Now, if you're not familiar with Azure Verified Modules, just have a quick search of YouTube. I'll put a link in the description below to a video that we've done, but there's a few out there. So yeah, the standard interfaces that we have in AVM for Terraform have had some changes over the past months because as we've rolled them out, module authors have come to us and said, hey, this isn't really working for me, or I need this extra feature. So with that, there have been some changes. It's one of the reasons that we're not allowing modules to be at v1.0 yet, because unfortunately some of them are breaking changes, but this is necessarily part of the process. We are learning all the time and we don't always get it right. So what we're going to do is going to go through all of the interface changes that we have made and have a little explanation as to why we've made them. What I will then do is in the description below, I will put links to GitHub issues for each of the interface changes, where I'd like to invite both internal Microsoft and external contributions to these interface changes to understand if we're making the right choice. And if not, if please tell us if we are making the right choice, but if not, let's discuss alternatives. I want this to be a complete open and collaborative process. After a period of time, we'll update the linter rules again, and then these changes will start to become mandatory. At the moment, they are optional. So when you raise your pull request, you'll get the linting checks fail, but you can still merge your PR. Eventually, that won't be the case. So hopefully by the end of this month, we're looking to start making the lint checks mandatory. Okay, let's have a look at each of the interfaces in turn. So you can see the customer managed key interface on the screen now. We've had two changes in here which you would consider to be perhaps breaking. The first one is the user assigned identity resource ID used to be mandatory and now it's optional. The reason is some services like storage, for example, can use a system assigned identity. So if you specify null in there, then it will use the system one. And because of that, because we made it optional, that caused another problem, which was sometimes you might want to make a condition on it. So if you're using a user assigned identity, you might want to use that in a data source in order to get the client ID, for example, of the application. You need that for cognitive services. Now, because of that, because of the conditions, and if you watch my last video on nulls, which I'll put a link to, then what you'll know that you can't use an unknown value in a condition. So what we've had to do is wrap that in an object, and you can see we've done that here. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's a breaking change, but hopefully now you understand why. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so here we are in the locks interface. Now this suggestion came from the community, so I think you can see in the git blame information in a minute, it will tell us. But essentially we were using a kind of non-idiomatic way of doing this before. So what we had before we had an object with two attributes, name and kind, and the name was null by default. And then the default was an empty object. And what that means is with optionals is you actually, the default value would be name equals null and kind equals none, even though you specify an empty object in your config. That's fine, it worked. We did var kind is none, and then we did the count on that. But it's not very Terraformy, it's not very idiomatic Terraform. It's not what you expect when you use Terraform. What you expect is, if you don't want something, you should specify null. So if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, we've changed it. So now it's an object with the kind being a mandatory attribute. We also have the name as optional because we auto-generate that if you don't do it. And the default value of this object is null. So that means you can use a much more Terraformy way of doing things. If var.lock is not equal to null, then create the resource. Hopefully that's a nice simple one. Again, sorry for the changes. Okay, so we've got role assignments here. We've made a couple of changes to the conditional attributes. You can see that we've set them to null instead of default values, which makes sense because by default you shouldn't be forced to use conditions. We've also added the principal type, or going to add the principal type. This work will actually form a PR that I'm about to make, because the principal type is needed if you are using ABAC rules. Again, it's optional, so it won't be a breaking change. But yeah, we'll update the linter to the new version as well. So this this change isn't live yet, so you won't see it, but give us a few days. So tags, this has, as you can see, has changed from a map of any to a map of strings. Now, the reason for that is Azure tags are just strings. So it makes sense for the interface for them to be using the actual type. Of course, in Terraform, you can encode pretty much any value as a string. So that's up to you to do when you call the module. Also, we've made it a bit more idiomatic with Terraform. So we've swapped from a default empty map to default of null and added a description. Hopefully that will make sense. It's a nice, easy one. So I hope that makes sense and has helped you understand why we've made some of these changes. The other thing I want to mention is the location. So for resource modules, location used to be optional. We used to try and infer it from the resource group. But if you've watched my video, data sources are evil, then you will realize that actually this can be problematic. So what we've done is we're about to release a new version of the linter, which will make the location mandatory. So you must not have a default value for it. That means that you should remove the data source for the resource group and just ask your consumers to supply the location. I know it's another breaking change, but it's really done with the best intentions. The risk is that if we don't do it, that something will happen in a dependency graph, which will cause resources to be created and destroyed. So because if the location is unknown, then Terraform thinks it has to delete and recreate stuff. I hope that helps. Let's discuss this all in the GitHub issues that I'll link below. If there isn't a GitHub issue for the interface that you want to discuss, then please create one on the Azure Verified Modules website. We are always listening, and yeah, we want this to be a collaborative process. Thanks very much.